All right, history buffs, let's talk about William Wallace. You know him, the guy Mel Gibson played in Braveheart? The real William Wallace was no less a figure of legend. He rose from obscurity to become a symbol of Scottish resistance against English rule in the late 13th and early 14th centuries. His name became a rallying cry against the might of England's King Edward I. So grab your broadswords and buckle up, because we're diving headfirst into the real story of William Wallace. Pinning down the exact details of Wallace's early life is like herding cats, tricky business. Historians have been scratching their heads for centuries trying to piece together the puzzle. Some say he was born around 1270 in the heart of Scotland, others a few years later, perhaps in the early 1270s. One thing's for sure, he wasn't sipping tea with the English aristocracy. Wallace was far removed from the luxuries of noble life. We think he was born somewhere in the lowlands of Scotland, probably to a family of minor nobility. This region was known for its rugged beauty and resilient people. Not exactly peasants, but not exactly royalty either. They were somewhere in between, navigating the complexities of medieval society. His father might have been a landowner, or perhaps a knight serving the local lord. Point is, young William wasn't destined for a life of farming turnips. He was going places. His upbringing likely included training in arms and the ways of chivalry. Life in 13th century Scotland wasn't exactly a walk in the park. It was a time of strife and struggle, with constant threats from neighbouring England. So there you have it, the early years of William Wallace, shrouded in a bit of mystery but undeniably fascinating. His origins set the stage for the legend he would become. The year is 1297, and things in Scotland are tense. King Edward I of England, nicknamed Longshanks, had his eyes on conquering Scotland. Enter William Wallace, now a young man making a name for himself. Legend has it that he killed an English sheriff who'd been harassing him. This act of defiance was like lighting a match in a powder keg. Suddenly Wallace wasn't just another disgruntled Scotsman, he was a symbol of resistance. Wallace, with his charisma and knack for military strategy, quickly became the face of the rebellion. He had guts, determination, and a whole lot of angry Scotsmen ready to follow him into battle. Section 4. Wallace's finest hour, Stirling Bridge, and the legend grows. This was the moment that would define his legacy and change the course of Scottish history forever. September 1297, the English army, led by the Earl of Surrey, was feeling pretty confident. They believed their superior numbers and advanced weaponry would easily crush the Scottish resistance. They had the numbers, the fancy armour, the whole 9 yards. Their knights were clad in gleaming armour, and their soldiers were well trained and disciplined. They were about to face a ragtag bunch of Scottish rebels on the wrong side of the River Forth. The English underestimated the determination and ingenuity of the Scots. Wallace wasn't just about brute force, he was a cunning strategist. He understood the terrain and used it to his advantage, planning every move with precision. He chose his battleground carefully, forcing the English to cross the narrow Stirling Bridge in a slow, disorganized mess. The bridge became a bottleneck, turning their strength into a weakness. The Scottish army waited patiently on the other side, and when the moment was right, they struck. It was a massacre. The English were caught off guard and overwhelmed by the ferocity of the Scottish attack. Stirling Bridge was a decisive victory for Wallace and the Scottish rebels. The English forces were decimated, and their morale shattered. Overnight, Wallace became a hero, his name on everyone's lips. He was celebrated not just as a warrior, but as a symbol of hope and resistance for the Scottish people. Section 5. Betrayal, capture, and a gruesome end. The price of freedom. After Stirling Bridge, things were looking up for Wallace and the Scots. He was knighted and given the title of Guardian of Scotland, but Edward Longshanks was furious and rallied his troops. At the Battle of Falkirk in 1298, the Scots faced a brutal defeat. Wallace managed to escape and continued to fight the English in a guerrilla campaign for several years. In 1305, Wallace was betrayed by a Scottish nobleman and handed over to the English. He was taken to London, put on trial for treason, and found guilty. And the sentence? Well, let's just say it wasn't pretty. Section 6. The Wallace Legacy, Martyr, Myth, and National Identity. On August 23, 1305, William Wallace was executed in London. His death was not just an execution, it was a statement, a brutal display meant to crush the spirit of rebellion. And when I say executed, I mean they went full medieval on him. Wallace was subjected to the most gruesome methods of torture and execution known at the time. Wallace's brutal execution only solidified his status as a Scottish legend. His death was meant to instill fear, but instead it ignited a fire of resistance and hope. He became a symbol of courage, defiance, and the fight for freedom. His story was passed down through generations, inspiring countless Scots to stand up against oppression. Centuries after his death, Wallace's story continued to resonate with the Scottish people. His legacy lived on in songs, poems, and tales told by the fireside. His name became synonymous with Scottish national identity, a rallying cry for those who yearned for independence. Wallace's spirit was invoked in every struggle for Scottish freedom. Even stripped of the myths and legends, William Wallace remains a fascinating and important figure in Scottish history. His real-life deeds were as impressive as the legends that grew around him. He was a man who, against all odds, dared to challenge one of the most powerful kings in Europe. His victories in battle were remarkable, showcasing his strategic genius and unyielding spirit. So, the next time you hear the name William Wallace, remember the man, not the myth. Reflect on his courage, his sacrifices, and the enduring legacy he left behind for Scotland.